The Liz and Dick Cheney father-daughter media blitz has officially entered stage 3. Stage 1 was the legacy burnishing stage, in which Mr. Cheney defended the Bush administration by reminding us that, except for that one really big one, and anthrax, and all the attacks that killed our soldiers, and all the bombings of all our allies, there really weren't any other terrorist attacks on Americans during the Bush-Cheney years. Stage 2 was the Bash Obama stage, where Mr. Cheney, joined now by his daughter Liz, argued that not only were things like torture and indefinite detention at Guantanamo totally effective and generally awesome, but by eliminating those things, President Obama was making the country less safe. But today, Liz Cheney introduced us to stage 3, the persecution complex stage. You know how a lot of people are still mad at the Bush administration for its frequent claims of a link between Saddam Hussein and the 9/11 attacks? That totally untrue case for a war that we still can't get out of 6.5 years later? Turns out all that outrage is really just a smear campaign against the Bush administration, which never said anything of the sort.
The issue of a relationship between Saddam and 9/11, it's a claim that critics of the administration have used to sort of smear the administration, when in fact the administration wasn't making that claim.
Wasn't making that claim. Wasn't. You know, the real shame here is that all this stuff is on tape. Maybe the Cheneys don't know that.
We will have struck a major blow right at the heart of the base, if you will, the geographic base of the terrorists who've had us under assault now for many years, but most especially on 9/11.
The reason I keep insisting that there was a relationship between Iraq and Saddam and al-Qaeda, because there was a relationship between Iraq and al-Qaeda.
Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained. But chemical agents, lethal viruses, and shadowy terrorist networks are not easily contained.
So all that tape of Bush and Cheney connecting Saddam Hussein to 9/11 is a political smear? Really? Here's where Liz Cheney's logic gets really Cheney-esque. In her mind, the Saddam 9/11 claim is liberal propaganda, but the Saddam al-Qaeda link is totally valid.
The issue is whether there's a connection between Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda, which, as he mentioned in that speech, you know, George Tenet himself testified to. There's much evidence of the connection between Saddam and al-Qaeda and Saddam and other terrorist organizations.
Well, much evidence. So the message is, we never said Saddam Hussein was connected to 9/11. We only said he was connected to al-Qaeda, the people who planned 9/11, and we have much evidence for that. See? Innocent. And while you're busy trying to sort out the strange semantic difference between those two things, maybe you will forget that neither of them is true. Joining us now is Newsweek investigative correspondent and MSNBC contributor Michael Isikoff, co-author of Hubris, the inside story of spin, scandal, and the selling of the Iraq War. Mr. Isikoff, thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Rachel.
Drawing a connection between Saddam and 9/11 is a smear concocted by critics of the Bush administration? They never said that?
Right. Well, look, we could talk. Actually, we could probably just keep on rolling the videotape and find other clips. Liz Cheney's father, Vice President Cheney, had 3 separate Meet the Press appearances where he talked about and gave credence to the idea that Mohammed Atta, the lead 9/11 hijacker, had met with an Iraqi intelligence agent in Prague before the attacks, which would, if true, be pretty provocative evidence that there was some sort of connection between Saddam's government and the 9/11 attacks. At one point, Vice President Cheney said it was pretty well confirmed there was such a meeting. In another appearance on Meet the Press, he said it was a credible report. He raised it again after the war. And, of course, there was absolutely no evidence that such a meeting ever took place. It was debunked by the 9/11 Commission, as was the whole idea that there was any meaningful relationship between Iraq and al-Qaeda.
when Liz Cheney was specifically talking about this today on MSNBC, she said once the Mohammed Atta report was debunked, the administration stopped using that particular argument. They walked away from it. I mean, you've written the book on this. Did they actually drop that argument?
No, of course, as I pointed out. I mean, 3 times. The first time Cheney raised it was in December of 2001. Then he raised it in September of 2002. It's when he called it credible. This is right during the run-up, just weeks before the congressional vote on the authorization to invade Iraq. In February of 2003, Scooter Libby, Cheney's chief of staff, tried to get Secretary of State Powell to raise the claim about a meeting in Prague in the UN in his famous Security Council speech. He was pushing really hard, and Powell at that point was told by the CIA, look, it's just not true. We don't have any evidence to support it. But the vice president's office continued to push on this, and the vice president continued to raise it. Look, I mean, what strikes me, and the really kind of, insidious language here, and it's insidious in retrospect, is this idea of the word connection. That's what they fall back on. That's what Liz Cheney falls back on, connection. Well, one can just as easily say there's a connection between Liz Cheney and MSNBC. After all, she was on MSNBC today. There's video of her appearing with Andrea Mitchell. There must be a connection between them. It doesn't prove anything. The important point is, was there any operational relationship? Did they work together? Did they collude? Were they trying to help each other? And that's what the 9/11 Commission concluded, as did the Senate Intelligence Committee. No, there's no evidence of that.
And the even bigger issue here, maybe the meta issue here, is this deliberate, intense effort to rewrite history, to make it seem like Bush and Cheney never led us down this path, never gave any misleading information to the country about the connections between what we were doing in Iraq and what had happened to us on 9/11. The idea that this is still being litigated by Cheney's daughter now. I mean, what do you think the point is of this media blitz? We never heard from Liz Cheney before.
Well, look, it's about legacy. It's about the vice president's standing in history, the Bush administration's standing in history. I mean, it's worth remembering Liz Cheney did serve in the Bush administration. She had a top position in the Near East Affairs Department of the State Department. She worked on Mideast policy. She's no novice to these issues, and she's a stalwart defender of our father. And I'm sure some people will find that touching. But the fact is that when you get to the hardcore facts and you get to, what's true, what's not. I mean, this is not going to hold up. The claim doesn't hold up. It's not seriously accepted by anybody who's knowledgeable with the period right now.
I wish they'd come on my show so I could try to make it not hold up right to them, but they won't say yes yet. I live in hope.
Right.
Michael
Keep
Isikoff.
pushing.
I
Keep
am
pushing.
every day.
Yes.
Newsweek investigative correspondent,
Thank you.
MSNBC contributor. Thanks, Mike. Nice to see you.